Hello and welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 21, or as they like to call it, UFC Vegas 22. I'm Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, is Keith Schillen. Keith is executive director of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, as well as the Sherdog Radio Network, where he is the creator and host of numerous shows, including MMA Past, Present, and Future, and, of course, the Schillen and Duffy Show, which you are listening to right now. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Right off the top, let's wish a happy birthday to Gregor Gillespie, who turns 34 on this day, March 18th, as we record. We'll be talking about him probably in about an hour and a half or so. But
hey, while we're throwing out happy birthdays, can I throw out a happy birthday to someone who I know won't listen, but tomorrow the love of my life's birthday, my wife. Happy birthday to Mrs. Schillen.
Hey, well, happy birthday indeed, Mrs. Schillen. Mrs. Duffy has no choice but to listen because she's sitting on the couch about 5 feet away from me. But I assure you that she's paying as little attention as possible.
Yeah, that's like all our listeners.
Okay. Yes, the only people who pay close attention to our show are the coaching staff at Anchorage BJJ. Not a whole lot to say about this one. It is headlined by a high-stakes contest in the middleweight division between Derek Brunson and the red-hot Kevin Holland. Somebody's going to survive and advance, and whoever wins that one, honestly, may be no more than another fight or two away from a title shot. South of that, some veterans, definitely lots of prospects. We have 5 UFC newcomers on this card. You and I were talking off air about this just before we started recording. Sounds as though our level of interest and excitement for these prospects may vary a little bit. So it'll be interesting as we get to each of those, how we feel about that. It also features, I believe, the second married couple ever to fight on the same UFC card in the form of JP and Cheyanne Bays. Anything else you want to add before we dive right into the card, Keith?
Just going off again on placement. I always say, like, placement of bouts make no sense. I don't understand why, good prospect like Grant Dawson and Leonardo Santos, he's 41, say what you want about him, but he's got a very good record in the UFC. Why that fight is on the prelims, and like Max Griffin continues to get on the main card, though he's, a B-level UFC fighter at best. How Harry Hunsucker is on the main card. Just placement is always confusing.
Always confusing. If there's a logic behind it, I have not figured it out in almost 20 years of watching the UFC, but that's okay because we're going to talk about all 12 of these fights in whatever order they want to give them to us. Right off the top, we have a matchup in the women's bantamweight division. A battle of the Julias, as Julija Avila takes on Julija Stoliarenko. Avila, the 32-year-old, is 8-2 overall. She is 2-1 in the UFC, having fought most recently back in September and lost a unanimous decision to Sijara Eubanks, which snapped a 4-fight winning streak for her. She'll be taking on Stoliarenko. The 27-year-old Lithuanian is 9-4-2 overall. She is 0-2 in the UFC, those losses being separated by almost 2 years, however, with a 5-fight winning streak in between. Her UFC return was last August. She lost a unanimous decision to Yana Kunitskaya. Right now, Avila, one of the higher favorites on the card. She is out there minus 360 to minus 370. Stoliarenko available at plus 310 or plus 315. Keith, I'm going to say that a lot of times when there are two fighters that are relatively unproven at the UFC level, and the odds are this wide, I usually think they're an overreaction. I'm not sure that's the case in this case. I think Julija Avila should be a healthy at least 3-1 favorite in this fight. And that's not all buy-in on Avila from my point of view, although I still am pretty high on her despite the loss to Sijara Eubanks. It's just that I'm definitely not sold on Stoliarenko. I saw how Eubanks beat Avila, and that's just not something Julia Stoliarenko is going to do. Stoliarenko, I don't see her being able to hit takedowns and control Avila and take advantage of Avila's over-aggression. Stoliarenko, like, snatches quick arm bars or she loses, generally speaking. And by the standards of the women's bantamweight division, she is a minus athlete. I just think this is a great matchup for Avila. Stoliarenko, unless Avila makes a bad mistake and gets into a scramble early on where Stoliarenko is able to, grab a submission, I don't think Stoliarenko is going to be able to make Avila pay for her mistakes. I've got Avila in this one big. I won't call it a stoppage, but give me Avila by a lopsided unanimous decision.
Wow. Yeah, you came out right out the gate, like dropping hammers, like making a very, very confident pick. I understand it. Avila's got a lot of good skills. First of all, that stands out. She's just a big fighter for the weight class. She's a big bantamweight. She's more of a brute than an athlete. I know you talked about Stoliarenko being like a minus athlete. I don't think Avila's like a great athlete. I think she just I don't know. I feel like she'd be good in like bench pressing and stuff like that. She'd be strong or like not even like, I shouldn't say bench pressing, like strength at like picking up a keg or something. Like she's a brute. She's a high volume striker, good jab, throws combos, just kind of walks right through punches, and we saw that in pretty much every one of her fights. She hits hard. Defensively, she keeps her chin too high, which is actually going to be, I think I mentioned chin too high a lot. That's going to be a big theme for this card. She'll toss in a quick high kick. I like her step in knees or step in elbows. She gets some clinch takedowns. However, she was taken down by Sijara Eubanks, where she was a big favorite in that fight, and she struggled to get off bottom. Now, she was attacking with some submissions off the back, almost on 2 occasions caught Eubanks in a triangle, but she only has 1 submission on her record, so I think that might have been more Eubanks, baiting her into those submissions or not really worrying about the submissions that they were close. Moving on to Stoliarenko. Stoliarenko is also a big bantamweight. She is extremely aggressive on the feet. Though she's, like you mentioned, she's not a great athlete. She's kind of flat-footed. She drops her hands, but she's unorthodox, has a herky-jerky style. But she throws hard. She throws wild. She's very hittable because she just runs aggressively into punches, which would be funny considering both her and Avila are very aggressive on the feet. She does have power, though. She'll throw in a quick high kick. She loves a Superman punch to kind of close the distance. Her clinch striking's not bad. Her elbow in the clinch that she did to Lisa Fervosa is one of the worst cuts I've ever seen. One of the bloodiest fights in MMA history, definitely in women's MMA history. Though, as I used to think that was a strength of her, her last fight against Yana Kunitskaya, she got brutalized in the clinch. You mentioned it that she wants to get an armbar, and she'll get the fight to the ground any way possible. She'll jump to guard. She'll throw an Imanari roll. She is, as you mentioned, armbar specialist. She's got so many first-round submissions. The other thing I like about her is that she has, she's a former, she's headline Invictus and stuff like that. She's former Invictus champion. She'll go 25 minutes. I am not nearly as confident as you are. I think this is a tough fight to call. Avila is really good on the feet. But she showed some holes on the ground. Stoliarenko is tough on the feet because she's got such a weird style that you really can't train for. Though she's not nearly as technical as Avila. However, if she gets it to the fight to the ground, she can end it. And we're gonna disagree right away. I'm gonna say that she does. Avila just really worried me after the last fight that she couldn't get up from bottom. I think Stoliarenko gets it to the ground somehow. And I want to say that she does catch the armbar. So you were going, I think you're going to lock in. You're locking the night. I'm going the opposite. Right out the bat, I'm throwing my upset special. Stoliarenko at plus 350. I say she gets it done.
Oh, man. Well, it's gonna be a wild night on the preview. We can tell already. Next up in the men's flyweight division, the first of the aforementioned 5 debuting fighters on this card. And this one is not one of the short notice ones, but a gentleman who comes to the UFC through the time-honored, at this point, route of Dana White's Contender Series. That would be JP Buys. The 24-year-old South African is 9-2 overall. He won choking out Jacob Silva with a guillotine choke all the way to sleep back on the Contender Series in November. Waiting to welcome him to the octagon will be Bruno Silva. The 31-year-old Pitbull Brothers product is 10-5-2 with 1 no contest. He is 0-2 in the UFC, having lost to Tagiru Lambekov last October at UFC Fight Night Moraes versus Sandhagen, and to David Dvorak at UFC Fight Night Lee versus Oliveira back in March of 2020. Odds on this one, nonetheless, fairly close. Buys is out there as a -155 to -160 favorite. You can get Silva on the comeback around +140. Keith, who have you got in this one, and why?
Well, I like this matchup. I think this is a good matchup between 2 good flyweights. I just love the division. I'll start with the newcomer, JP Buys. He's a Contender Series guy. He has 2 losses in his career. One of them was to Joby Sanchez on the Contender Series, which is not a bad loss at all. The other one was a DQ, which led to a post-fight brawl. And I think he avenged that loss too. He's very strong, classic wrestler boxer, nice pop in his strikes. Can really box it up in the pocket. His hands aren't that fast, and he's got a little bit of defense flaws, keeps his chin high. I should probably ring a bell every time I say that tonight. Though I like that he hides a high kick behind his punches well. Doesn't check any leg kicks because he's a wrestler, very heavy on his front foot. He is an elite level wrestler. I mean, this guy competed in the World Championships. Going back to the Joby Sanchez fight, he suplexed Joby Sanchez on the Contender Series. Good in scrambles, though I'm surprised how often he's actually been taken down in the past for such a high-level wrestler. But if he gets on top, we saw in his last fight against Jacob Silva, good top control, good top pressure, some solid ground and pound. The only other thing that, if it's a real heavy wrestling match, I might be a little worried about is his cardio. As he was beating Joby Sanchez and kind of gassed out and led to Joby Sanchez coming back. Move over to Bruno Silva. Lots of movement, fast hands, tight boxing, throws combos, decent pop. Go back to his David Dvorak fight. He almost knocked Dvorak out in a loss. A lot of calf kicks. He was hurt to the body by Dvorak, which I don't like to see. Can sneak in takedowns of himself. He's got some good entries. He's a Brazilian a black belt, some slick back takes, though he was out wrestled in his last 2 fights that were losses to Ulbektov and Dvorak, and he slowed down late in the fight against Dvorak, which might have been the difference. I like Bruno Silva. Unfortunately, he is matched again against a wrestler that could probably out wrestle him, and this is the best wrestler he's faced, since he's been in the UFC. So I expect Buys to get some takedowns, use some heavy top pressure, and I think he wins a decision in his UFC debut.
Yeah, I feel what you're putting down here, because I feel as though Silva is better than his record and his work in the UFC so far has made him look. But JP Buys is the absolute worst guy to try to prove it against, because even if Silva gets out wrestled badly in the early going, if Buys starts to fade, if his cardio starts to fade, Silva's cardio has really not been a strong point for him either. So I just don't see there being enough in the tank for him to take advantage, even if it gets to that point. I'm with you. I think JP Buys wins his UFC debut by decision. I'm not going to pick him to get the finish here, even though he is, he is a good finisher just because, he's so aggressive on the ground once he gets people down there, both with ground and pound, and, willing to grab submissions. I'm not picking it to happen here, but yeah, Buys by decision. Next up on the UFC Vegas 22 prelims, it is a bantamweight matchup between Montel Jackson and Jesse Strader. Jackson, the 28-year-old, is 9-2 overall. He is 3-2 in the UFC. He fought most recently last July at UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2, where he lost a unanimous decision to Brett Johns that snapped a 3-fight winning streak in the octagon for Jackson. He will be welcoming the newcomer, Strader. The 29-year-old Californian is 5-1 in his young mixed martial arts career. He is obviously 0-0 in the UFC, but he comes in on a 2-fight winning streak. Both of those fights, however, having taken place all the way back in 2019, it will have been over a year and a half since he has appeared in any sort of ring or cage. As it stands, Jackson is the highest favorite on the card. He is minus 650 to minus 675, depending on where you look. Strader, plus 475, up close to plus 500 as the massive underdog. Jackson's nickname is Quick, and it is definitely true. Strader's is sui generis, which means one of a kind or unique. I don't know whether that's true. Keith, does he have any unique opportunities to pull off the massive upset here?
Yeah, I mean, he has a unique opportunity to be such a huge underdog and pull off an upset. I mean, I've already picked my upset special, so I'm not going to do it again. This is a little bit of a mismatch, and that's why the odds are saying the way it is. Jackson, southpaw, he's very big for the weight class. I mean, he's got a 75-inch reach. They're going to talk about the size of his extra large gloves. Fast hands, throws straight punches down the pipe, kind of developing some power. His last fight against Brett Johns, he hurt him in that fight. He's a good clinch fighter. I would say he's an underrated wrestler. He can get some takedowns from entries, but he also likes like judo, foot sweeps. He's got good ground and pound. He will grab, those big hands I'll mention. He'll grab an arm and then kind of control it and then slide an elbow. The issue, though, is why I said he's an underrated wrestler offensively, and I think he's actually pretty good defensively. In his 2 losses in the UFC, he's been arrested to Ricky Simone and Brett Johns. Now, move that over to Strader. I only did, a little bit of tape study on him. Pulled up some of his combate fights. His only loss was to Marcel Rojo, who we just saw in the UFC. I think it was last week. He fights behind a high guard. Even though he fights behind a high guard, he's very hittable. He backs straight up, doesn't check leg kicks. Hands are kind of slow. Throws from his hips. He does throw combinations, and he's fun. Like he'll be entertaining. He loves to go to the body. In fact, he dropped Rojo with a body shot. Didn't finish him, but actually dropped him. Obviously, didn't finish him. He lost to him, but he hurt him to the body. But he targets the body more than he actually targets the head. It's pretty crazy. He's got some good power. I like his calf kicks. I am worried about his chin, though, as Rojo hurt him bad. He also got beat up in the clinch by Rojo. He can wrestle a little bit. Good entries, good top control, good ground and pound. But he's taking a big step up in competition, even from Rojo. But like the guys he's beaten in the UFC, like he beat this guy Michael Jackson, who had like a 1-5 record or something. Straight is in UFC level. Jackson is better everywhere. I think Jackson is a good prospect in the division. I say he styles on him and then finishes him. You know what? I originally wrote down second round, but I'm gonna go first round. I say Jackson takes him out in the first round.
I love that you elaborated on Jackson's wrestling that way, because as soon as you said that you thought Jackson's wrestling was a little underrated, my immediate response was, yeah, because like that's how he's taken his 2 losses in the UFC. So the image is stuck in your mind of, Ricky Simone just kind of outlasting and out hustling him and using takedowns, of Brett Johns coming back from getting hurt and controlling the fight with takedowns. But yeah, like Jackson's wrestling is actually pretty good. If you're a 5'10" bantamweight, and your legs go up to your sternum, you're always going to give up a takedown to good wrestlers in your division. But I don't think it's a particularly weak point for him. Everything you said about Jackson's striking is dead on. Jesse Strader, there are some bantamweights in the UFC that he can beat, but this is about as bad of a matchup as I can think of for him, because everything he's going to want to do, the way he's shown himself able to win fights at the combate level, is just going to feed right into Jackson's strengths. Yeah, this is going to be time on the gunnery range for Strader. I could certainly see him getting finished in the first round, but I'm going to say Jackson is just going to have the slight bit of caution of taking on such an unknown quantity as such a high favorite and not wanting to get not wanting to like open the door to the huge upset. So I'm going to say that Strader makes it to the second round, but give me Montel Jackson by second round TKO. With that, we come to a middleweight matchup between Trevin Giles and Roman Dolidze. Giles, the 28-year-old Houston native, is 13-2 overall. He is 4-2 in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak, having taken a split decision over ultra short notice James Krause back at UFC 247 last February, then knocking Bevon Lewis out in brutal fashion at UFC on ESPN 17 in November. He will be welcoming Dolidze not to the UFC, but at least to the middleweight division. The 32-year-old Georgian is 8-0 overall. He is 2-0 in the UFC. Kind of came out of nowhere in the middle of last year. He had not fought since 2018, showed up in the UFC in July of last year, and knocked out Kadis Ibragimov at UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2, then took a split decision over John Allan at UFC on ESPN 19 last December. Dolidze, despite being new to the division, is the slight favorite over Giles. He is out there around minus 140. Giles available at plus 115 or plus 120 as the slight underdog. I have got to say that I'm surprised that Dolidze is doing this. And furthermore, I'm surprised that he is a bit of a favorite. Dolidze, if you don't remember or if you haven't seen him, he is a yoked guy at 205. At 205, he looked like a guy who probably had to cut a lot of weight. He is a physical specimen. His upper body in particular, he is a heavily muscled guy, just big chest, big shoulders, big arms. I didn't expect much of him when he debuted against Ibragimov. I mean, I expected that he might beat Ibragimov just because Kadis Ibragimov was not one of the best light heavyweights we've seen in the UFC. Like I believe he was on both of our cut list after that fight because that was like his fourth straight loss. But Dolidze, there is something about him that reminds me of Ovince St. Preux. And it's not the exact techniques that they use, but it's that if you ask me what it looks like when Ovince St. Preux fights, I'm just stuck. I've seen the guy fight 15 times and I'm like, he kind of just stands around there and moves his hands around and then he'll like throw like a high kick and then all of a sudden there's a scramble and he's throwing a shoulder choke on a guy. He just has this kind of disjointed set of skills that they don't really coalesce into like any sort of coherent game, but he still manages to beat a lot of people. That's what I feel like. I've seen Roman Dolidze fight twice now, and I couldn't describe his game to you. I can tell you like what techniques he used and how he finished Ibragimov, but I couldn't say what his game looks like. I can't wait for you to tell me what his game looks like because you have a better eye for it than I do. In comparison, Giles is much more of a known quantity. He is a sharp boxer with good power in his hands. He has good kicks. He is a more than serviceable offensive wrestler when he feels like it. I'd say he's an average defensive wrestler. He can be taken down. I don't know that I have faith in Dolidze to make 185 and have anything to offer here. And until I see it, I guess I'm not going to believe it. So Dolidze has never lost before. I'm not going to pick him to just like come out and get knocked out flat, but give me Trevin Giles. Give me Trevin Giles by decision, probably, pulling ahead in the later rounds, just as he outlasts and exhausted Dolidze.
What a homer. Obviously, you picked the guy from Houston.
But are you going to pick against the cop?
Yeah.
See, this is the only fighter in the world that we agree on. Like the Venn diagram intersects Trevin Giles, the Houston cop. Like we both got to like him.
Yeah. If we ever need a third host, Trevin Giles is our pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll break down his style. I think you broke down Trevin pretty well. He uses a lot of movement. I think his last fight against Bevan Lewis was one of his best performances of his career. Kind of seeing a guy who's progressing. Fast hands, nice power, a lot of kicks. His jab is his everything. He's got a stinging jab. He throws like an up jab, similar to the way Floyd Mayweather shows it, and that's because he keeps it down by his side. He can hurt you with a jab. I mean, he dropped Bevan Lewis with the jab. Uh, Dominic Cruz pointed out though that he can be, he can have some low output, not be that aggressive. He can kind of look for the perfect punch. He keeps his hands low, which hurts, which hurts you defensively, but helps him in his jab because, like I said, he throws an up jab and he comes from a little different angle. He's physically strong. He's willing to just push against the fence, grind against the fence, slow you down that way. Has okay entries. I wouldn't say he's a great wrestler, but he can get the fight to the ground. Though he doesn't look to wrestle often, he did show some improving defense against Bevan Lewis. He tried to close the distance a couple times. Though sub defense is still a little worrisome to me, as he was caught in back-to-back fights and guillotine chokes. Movo Dolidze, he's simply not as good as his record would suggest. I said that last time we broke down film of him. Uses a lot of feints, though he's kind of slow because he's not a fluid athlete. He's a little stiff. Throws one strike at a time. He commits to the overhand right way too much. I actually think even though he throws the overhand right, I think his check left hook is his best punch. He does have power, as you mentioned. He's absolutely yoked out of your mind. But he loads up on everything, which is what slow him down. Kicks are good though. His kicks are quick. He does check leg kicks, so I like that. He's a solid wrestler. He's a legitimate submission threat if he can get the fight to the ground. He did in his last fight. So there was a little bit of parity. He was kind of abandoning in his wrestling. He did not do that in his last fight. You're a homer for picking Trevin Giles because he's from Houston. Well, I'm a homer because I'm picking him because he's a police officer. So that's it. I say he pieces him up and he wins the fight. This is a close. This is not one of the best fights on the card. But I'm not going against my fellow police officer. So give me Trevin Giles by decision.
Bonus question: Does Roman Dolidze make weight tomorrow morning?
You know what? We've had a fairly uneventful week. I mean, we did have Johnny Eduardo fight get canceled because Johnny Eduardo is never going to fight in the UFC again. He's been out for like 5 years. And then we got Harry Hunsucker on the card because we need Harry Hunsucker on the card. But other than that, it's been pretty uneventful. So I will say no, he doesn't. And he's taking it on short notice too.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's getting an arm like amputated right now. Who knows? But I'm with you. Or he looks ghastly and ghoulish when he gets up there. Is always possible as well. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
It's not often where Trevin Giles is the guy coming into the fight and not being the ripped one.
Yeah, because I mean he's a
pretty
built dude, but yeah. Next up, it is a lightweight matchup that stands out for if it is possible to quietly go on an impressive winning streak in the toughest division in the sport. These are two gentlemen showing the way to do it. It is Grant Dawson and Leonardo Santos. Dawson, the 27-year-old Nebraskan, is 16-1 overall. He is a perfect 4-0 in the UFC since joining off of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series. Most recently, he fought Nad Narimani at UFC Fight Night Figueiredo versus Benavidez 2, winning by unanimous decision. Before that, he choked out Derek Minner in what I believe was a 150-pound catchweight bout back last February. He'll be taking on the aged or ageless Santos, not the oldest fighter on the card, the oldest man on the card. Santos, the 41-year-old Brazilian, is 18-3-1 overall. He is 7-0-1 in the UFC. He is on a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC lightweight division. And if you didn't know that off the top of your head, it is because it has taken him 7 years to rack up those 6 wins. He fought most recently last July taking a unanimous decision over Roman Bogatov at UFC 251. Before that, he last appeared in June of 2019, knocking out Stephen Ray at UFC Fight Night Gustafson versus Smith. Before that, he had been off for almost 3 full years. But he is back. He is looking as good as ever. And again, this is about as quiet and unorthodox a matchup as you can get between two guys that are a combined 11-0-1 in the UFC. Keith, we were talking just a bit in between segments here. Santos, I mean, he's doing great anyway, but he's a bit of a what might have been story. When he went on that 3-year hiatus, that was off of a 3-fight winning streak that included Anthony Rocco Martin, Kevin Lee, and Adriano Martins. He had to have been on the cusp of the top 10 just at that point. If you stuck together the winning streak he's on right now and had just done it in a timely fashion, like at least fighting twice per year, he would be a top 10 fighter right now.
Yeah, you might. I think you're right. I mean, a win over Kevin Lee is fantastic. Even though it was a long time ago, that's still a really good win.
Yes, because that's something that people still don't do to Kevin Lee.
No, you know? That's the guy in the co-main event. You know how fighting Kevin Lee goes.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that one for sure.
Yeah.
The thing that I see when I look at this is I'm impressed with Dawson, obviously. For a guy that came in, I mean, he had a really good record. He looked good on the Contender Series, but I mean, he was kind of a tweener. He seemed to be deciding early on whether he wanted to be a featherweight or a lightweight. He's not fought anyone as good as Leonardo Santos. Leonardo Santos has fought almost exclusively people that are at least as good as Grant Dawson. I think the difference in not overall experience, because they honestly have about the same number of fights, and Dawson has been far more active, but the difference in amount of high level competition they fought, I think that's going to be kind of telling. I think this is going to be a big test for Dawson. I'm kind of surprised that he's coming into this as a 2-1 or better favorite. He's out there around minus 210 right now. Santos plus 175, plus 180. Talk me down off the ledge. Does the oldest and most unlikely fringe contender in the UFC lightweight division get it done again?
I mean, it's very, very possible that he gets it done. Like, I'm with you. I think this fight should be extremely close. Should be a pick'em fight. I could. Other than maybe the co-main event, this is the matchup that's intriguing me the most. I'll start with Dawson. Dawson does some, to me, he does some really good things, but he also has, he's learning. He's learning on the job. His boxing still needs a lot of work. His hands, if I'm being honest, are kind of slow. He throws arm punches, so doesn't really pack too much power. He stands up really high. He really overreacts when he gets hit, or he doesn't keep his legs. Like, he'll get hit and like spin or kind of flail a little bit. But that was like some of the negatives. Like, some of the positives is he really uses his lower body well in offensively. Step in knees. He throws a lot of kicks, body kicks. If you look at his last fight against Nad Narimani, he was destroying Narimani's legs with calf kicks. He's a good wrestler. Got some good timing on his entries. Great hip control. Like when a scramble ensues, he'll a lot of times control the hip, kind of keep his body, higher than his opponent, keeping his head higher than his opponent. He also is good when he's on top, like heavy pressure, advances position, good back takes. Now move on to Santos. I think his striking is pretty solid. He's got a long jab. I really like his slip and rip right hand style. I would say very deceiving power. I mean, he knocked out Kevin Lee. He brutally knocked out Stevie Ray. I mean, the knockout of Stevie Ray is beautiful. There's a fade back right hand that connected. He does keep his chin a little high, back straight up, but he throws a lot of kicks. And the reason why he throws so many kicks is because he baits you into trying to take him down. Because if you take him down, you're going against a 4-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, who's half his victories are by submission. And if you don't take him down, he can sneak in and take down himself. So, You know what? I'm going upset again. I think Santos has the advantage in the boxing, and I know he has the advantage in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So shout out to, former Loudmouth MMA host Craig Allen, who always was talking up Leandro Santos. I say Santos catches him in the second round, and you know what? I haven't done this in a long time, but I'm taking an upset as my lock. I, I'm going bald. I'm going to say the old man does it once again. So give me Santos. I'm taking that one to the bank.
Outstanding. All right. I'm with you on the upset. I mean, you might have felt that I was slightly building towards that as I introduced the two fighters. I'm with you. I think I think he is just a smoother striker than Dawson, and probably even has more raw power, even though Dawson has good power when he lands just because he throws hard. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he's going to hurt him on the feet. Dawson reacts like a wrestler. He's going to want to take him down. And if he does, especially if he's dinged up or compromised at all, that's not a good place to be. Give me Santos. And I'm going to be a little different from you just by saying third round submission. But yeah, I've got Santos in the upset here. The old man is not quite done yet. And yeah, I mean, what a story if this guy starts flirting with the rankings in his 40s, because this is not a division where fighters typically age well. I mean, name me the top lightweight over 40 ever. It's just not happened.
Yeah, I don't know.
That brings us to what I believe is the feature prelim of UFC on ESPN 21. In the women's bantamweight division, it is Macy Chiasson versus Marion Reneau. Reneau is the oldest fighter on this card. She is also, I believe, the oldest woman ever to fight in the UFC at this point, a record that she breaks every time she fights again. The 43-year-old Belizean, by way of California, is 9-6-1 overall. She is 5-5-1 in the UFC. She is currently riding a 3-fight losing streak, but those are against three of the best in the division in Kat Zingano, Yana Kunitskaya, and most recently Raquel Pennington, to whom she lost a unanimous decision at UFC on ESPN 11 back in June. She'll be taking on Chiasson. The 29-year-old Louisiana native is 6-1 overall. She is 4-1 in the UFC since joining through the all-female 28th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She fought most recently at UFC Fight Night Anderson versus Blachowicz 2 back just a little over a year ago, taking a unanimous decision over Shanna Young that allowed her to bounce back from the first loss of her career, which was against Lena Landsberg all the way back at UFC Fight Night Hermansson versus Cannonier in September of 2019. Chiasson is out there around a 2-1 favorite. She is minus 200. You can get Reneau at plus 170 or plus 175 as the underdog. Obviously, Marion Reneau, even though she's on a 3-fight losing streak, she's been competitive each time out, and it really is just kind of stunning how ageless she feels in there. I mean, obviously she is a physical specimen. As someone who is in my 40s myself, and you might charitably say that I have slipped a bit from my athletic prime, it puts me to shame to see the shape this woman is in. I mean, she is still a plus athlete by the standards of this division, which is shocking. Like she is strong. She is quick. She has very fluid movement. Her gas tank is at least not a minus. Like against Pennington, Kunitskaya, and Zingano, all three of whom were top 10 bantamweights when she fought them. None of them beat her because they just wore her out and she was exhausted. Like that's not what it's been. She still has one of the most well-rounded skill sets in the division. I believe she was a striker by preference way back when her career first started, but she has become somebody who is good in all phases. She's a good offensive wrestler, good defensive wrestler, definitely an opportunistic submission artist. Chiasson, there are certain broad parallels that I see between her and Megan Anderson. Like her sheer just size and physicality. I've seen her listed at 5'9". I've seen her listed at 5'11". I've never been next to her with a tape measure, but she's closer to 5'11". She is a physically imposing woman. I don't know how she continues to make the bantamweight limit. Yeah, I think she might quietly be hoping that Megan Anderson is wrong and the featherweight division isn't going away. Because as she gets ready to pass age 30, I don't know how long it's going to be reasonable to expect her to make 135 pounds. But she also reminds me of Megan Anderson in that when you are that tall and, you know, like built that way, defensive wrestling will always be a bit of a liability. But what I like about Chiasson's game is she's embraced a willingness to become more of an offensive wrestler. Like her win over Pani Kianzad was kind of an eye-opener to me, because I expected Kianzad to be the better wrestler and then to have the advantage once they got to the ground. And instead, it was Chiasson who was able to get takedowns late and choke her out. I know Macy Chiasson is a strong favorite here, and there's always the chance that this will be the fight where Reneau just goes off a cliff athletically, just age finally catches up with her. But I'm not picking this to be that fight. I think Chiasson will hurt her on the feet. Chiasson is definitely dangerous in the clinch, but I expect Reneau to be able to survive, to wear Chiasson down, and she'll be the fresher woman in the third round. And give me Reneau by third round. It could be a TKO or submission, but it's going to take place on the ground. I'm going to say submission. Give me Marion Reneau by third round submission. This is my upset pick of the night. I feel pretty strongly about it. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm crazy, Keith.
Well, I don't think you're crazy. So we actually broke this fight down. They were supposed to fight, I think maybe a month or so ago. I actually don't remember what happened. I think probably something happened with COVID or something. I haven't even looked at this fight since. I just copied my notes from last time and kind of forgot about this fight. So I'm strictly going off my notes from last time. Chiasson, as you mentioned, humongous bantamweight. If she moved up to featherweight, she'd probably be the number one contender already. Obviously, big reach, a long arm, long legs. She has like big, tall man's power, tall woman's power. She has a solid chin, considering she has a lot of defensive holes. For example, she doesn't really move her head. Shayna Young, of all people, were really teeing off on her in the first round of their fight. She's very hittable. I wrote that she reminds me of a woman's version of Tim Means. While she's long and lengthy, she prefers the clinch. Like, she likes using that tall man's clinch. And I'm not trying to be sexist when I say tall man. It's just an expression. She's strong in the clinch, dirty boxing, elbows in close. Knees are very brutal. She also will, like, drape over her opponents. What I mean, like, put you against Kenan, just kind of like lean on them and try to get them to carry her weight to wear them down. Her takedown defense is weak. I mean, she was taken down often and gassed out against Lena Landsberg. Her cardio looked better against Shayna Young, especially in the clinch, where she landed some really good knees and punches. Now move over to Reneau. As you mentioned, I think she's 43, 44. She's way up there in age. She could fall off a cliff overnight. So everything I say about her, I don't say with much confidence. Well, I have confidence in the bad. If I say something bad about her, it's chances are she hasn't improved it. If I say something positive about her, like, that could be gone overnight. As far as striking, mostly a boxer. She really steps in her shots, gets some good snap on her shots, good head movement, has a slip and rip counter striking style. Her dipping left hook is her best strike, though she really struggled in the clinch against Yana Kunitskaya, against Raquel Pennington. She can sneak in a takedown, but she isn't a technically sound grappler, though she is a submission threat. If she can get it there, she can find a sub both on top or off her back. You picked this as an upset. I'm not going to pick the upset, but I agree that this line is much closer than the line suggests. I really also wanted to pick Reneau. She's more technically sound striker. She's the better grappler. However, the clinch was an issue, and I can't get past that. I think that's where Chiasson can have a lot of ability. If Chiasson's smart, she'll get it there. I think it's going to be a close match no matter what. So give me Macy Chiasson. I'll take by split decision.
The UFC Vegas 22 main card kicks off with the obligatory heavyweight slobber knocker as Tai Tuivasa welcomes short notice opponent Harry Hunsucker to the UFC. Tuivasa, the 28-year-old Australian, is 10-3 overall. He is 4-3 since joining the UFC back in 2017. He won his first 3 fights in the UFC, then lost 3 straight against Junior Dos Santos, Blagoy Ivanov, and Sergey Spivak. He bounced back from that 3-fight losing streak by knocking Stefan Struve back into retirement at UFC 254 last October. He faces Hunsucker, who just was added to the card within the last 48 hours. Hunsucker, the 32-year-old Kentucky native, is 7-3 overall. He appeared on Dana White's Contender Series last November, where he was knocked out in the first round by Jared Vanderaa. He bounced back from that with a first-round knockout of Corey Moon at Hard Rock MMA just a couple weeks ago. As you might expect, odds are pretty heavily in favor of Tuivasa here, and they are also all over the place, as this is a short notice matchup, and at least one of the fighters is not much of a known quantity. But Tuivasa, you can get him as good as minus 350. Hunsucker is also available at around plus 350 at the moment if you like him as the underdog. Tai Tuivasa, Keith, he has some work to do. I actually featured him in my column that drops on Wednesdays of Fight Week about fighters that are under additional pressure to perform than just the straight W or the L. There's like some reason the fight's more important. This fight is important for Tuivasa because while he's been just kind of bouncing around and, you know, he's been a fun fighter to watch and drinking beer out of shoes, a bunch of heavyweights under 30 have come into the UFC and actually started stringing wins together. Surreal Gone is the most obvious example, but, you know, Tom Aspinall, Chris Dawkins, Sergey Spivak, who actually beat Tuivasa, you know, just over a year ago. All of a sudden, the UFC heavyweight division that's been just an old folks home for what feels like forever, it is undergoing, I think, its biggest youth movement in almost 20 years. Like the last time the division was this full of kind of up and coming young fighters, we were talking about like Rico Rodriguez, Josh Barnett, and Frank Mir. Yeah. Well, hell, we were talking about Andrei Arlovsky, and Arlovsky's like 42 now. If Tuivasa, he'll probably stick around the UFC for a while, but if he wants to be more than the funny dude that drinks beer out of a shoe, it's go time, and he needs to blow away Harry Hunsucker. Does he get it done?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that was a really good point you mentioned about, you know, when we talk about young heavyweights, he's not the one that people are getting excited about. I do want to say this. I don't think Tai Tuivasa should be a massive favorite against anybody in the UFC, including Harry Hunsucker. Like, he should be a favorite in this fight. I'm going to pick him to win, but he shouldn't be as big of a favorite as he is until I see some huge improvements in his wrestling. He wings punches, but despite winging punches, he has good hand speed, decent pop, throws everything hard. He's really been focused on some calf kicks. He's been working on his wrestling, American Kickboxing Academy. He did stop some takedowns against Stefan Struve, though I'm still going to assume until I see more that he's an awful wrestler. Sergey Spivak, as you mentioned, headlocked him, of all things, threw him, and he struggled to get up. Now move over to Harry Hunsucker. He's a Contender Series guy. If we recall, he got a very short notice fight on the Contender Series, and it's kind of happened again to him. So I kind of feel for him a little bit when he gets his opportunities, not getting much of a notice. He's aggressive. He sits on his punches, though he does keep his chin high in the air. He will throw some push kicks, some low leg kicks. I haven't seen much from him on the ground. He also, like, he started against Jared Vanderan just a little. I don't know how long that fight went, but it was very short. He will gas out early. I've seen him gas out in some regional fights against guys who aren't that good. When I did my Contender Series preview, I mentioned about the low-level competition he's fought. I mean, I'm talking about low-level guys, big fat guys. I compared it to guys that make Butterbean look like Sage Northcutt, like that kind of. He isn't a great athlete himself, and he's kind of just fat himself. And mind you, I'm saying this as a 39-year-old guy who could lose some pounds myself. So before someone mentions that, I'll admit it. Just when I thought we couldn't get worse than Tai Tuivasa versus Dontel Mays, we get Tai Tuivasa versus Harry Hunsucker.
Who lost to Dontel Mays.
Who lost to Dontel Mays. I say Tuivasa catches him in the chin. I say he deals with that pressure that you're throwing out on him. I say he catches the chin and knocks him out in the first round. So give me Tai Tuivasa with back-to-back first-round knockouts.
Yeah. The nice thing about Hunsucker is he fought 3 weeks ago, and you can see it on YouTube. So I've got like just a fresh, hot, sizzling scouting report on the 45 seconds of work he put in knocking out Corey Moon. You're right about, I mean, he throws some good hard low kicks. It was the low kicks that really won him the fight. Like he knocked out Moon with punches, but it's because Moon was like tottering all over the place on a busted leg by the time. Like he went down from punches, but went down and immediately started grabbing his leg. So unfortunately, the way Hunsucker threw those, I think any decent UFC heavyweight would just counter him with a punch and put him on his ass. I think Tuivasa might be able to do that. I talked about kind of the pressure that Tuivasa is under if he wants to become more than just, an opponent for the rest of this crop of young heavyweights. But it is encouraging that he seems to be taking his training more seriously. I remember being on a podcast. I was guesting on, a non-Sherdog podcast after the Blagoy Ivanov fight. So it was even before.
First of all, how dare you? Hold on, I gotta stop that. How dare you?
Oh, don't even. Like, if you're listening to this and you have a podcast, I will guest. I love guesting on podcasts.
I'm just joking. Carry on.
Yeah. I definitely can't write for any other sites, but I will talk your ear off if you want to have me on. But I remember one of us asked after the Ivanov loss, and this was even before the Spivak loss that was even worse. And the question was, do you think Tai Tuivasa trains? Like, full stop. That was the question. And we talked about it for a minute. There is something about Tuivasa that makes me think of Mark Hunt. And I'm not saying that he's Mark Hunt. I'm not saying he's the next Mark Hunt. He's not the poor man's Mark Hunt. He is not the homeless man's Mark Hunt. So get out of the comment section right now. But I'm just saying, in terms of being that kind of Polynesian guy, that he looks, he just kind of looks like a big, heavy dude, but he's light on his feet. You mentioned he has fast hands. There's just a certain athleticism to him. Unfortunately, he does not have the world-class kickboxing background of a Mark Hunt. And even more importantly, he does not have just the kind of weirdly impressive instincts on the ground of a Mark Hunt. Because Mark Hunt was the original, Derek Lewis, where it's just like, jiu-jitsu doesn't work on me. I'm just going to get up, or I'm going to bench press you and just kind of stand up. Tuivasa doesn't have any of that. But I have to imagine that the time he's spending at AKA, or the time he has spent there, will at the very least help him shore up his defensive wrestling. Like, how long could you stand to have Daniel Cormier styling on you before you're like, okay, I need to work on this? Harry Hunsucker, there are UFC level heavyweights he could beat, I'm sure, but Tuivasa is not one of them. I'm not super confident in this pick, but I am going to say Tuivasa by first round knockout, and God help us all if this thing goes past the first round. But yeah, I've got Tuivasa by first round knockout. He does survive, he does advance, and he takes one more step, towards being not just another guy in this heavyweight division. The main card continues onward with a welterweight tilt between Max Griffin and Kenan Song. Griffin, the 35-year-old Californian, is 16-8 overall. He is 4-6 in the UFC. He fought most recently at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Teixeira back in November, defeating Ramiz Brahimaj by gruesome, ear-destroying. I don't even want to talk about it because it will make me a little ill. That snapped a 2-fight losing streak for Griffin, however. He'll be taking on Song. The 31-year-old Chinese fighter is 16-5 overall. He is 4-1 in the UFC with wins over Callan Potter last February and Derek Krantz in August of 2019, representing a bounce back from his first UFC loss at the hands of Alex Morono all the way back in 2018. Despite the disparity in their records, Griffin is a comfortable favorite in this fight. He is out there at -200, while Song is available at +175 as the underdog. Keith, is this the token action fight of the card that it seems to be made out to be? And who do you got?
Yeah, it definitely is that. For some reason, Max Griffin always finds himself on main cards. I remember he was on the main card of a pay-per-view once, fairly recent. I think it might have been his last fight too, or 2 fights ago. I think a lot of it actually has to do with Song being Chinese, like trying to, that's like still a market that they're really trying to get a foothold in. So as far as the actually matchup, who wins? Tough call. This is actually one of the, to me, I think is one of the most competitive matchups there is. I'll start with Griffin. He's well-rounded, despite having a losing record in the UFC. He's not a great athlete, but he's pretty technically sound. He's a pressure striker, fights behind high guard defense. I would say tight striking, works behind a jab. His straight right is his best punch. Headhunts a little bit too much. Does lack true one-punch power. He does have stinging power. He can take you out, but he's not gonna. It's unlikely for him to have like a walk-off, one-punch Mark Hunt type crushing knockout. He will mix in takedowns, and he'll get a lot of takedowns. Though he's not a wrestler, I want to point that out. The NCAA wrestling tournament is going on right now. Max Griffin would not do well in it. He's not a wrestler. Though he does have good cardio, and he has just like a toughness. Like as the fight gets hard, he won't cower. He won't find it. Like he's mentally strong, where he can battle through some matches. Move on to Song. Song's big for the weight class. That stands out to me. Solid boxing. He's a power puncher. Straight right hand is, I would say, is his money punch. His left hook is pretty good too. Throws lots of kicks. He'll throw occasional spinning attack. Some defensive holds. Lacks head movement. Is one of them that stands out to me. He's very physically strong though. Though I don't know how I feel about his grappling yet. Like he defends takedowns by looking for guillotines. He let Derek Krantz not only get in on his hips, he let Derek Krantz pick him up and slam him. That's not a good look. And Derek Krantz actually almost submitted himself with a guillotine. When he was taken down, he does get up pretty well. He doesn't stay on the bottom. And his cardio was similar to Max Griffin. I'm impressed. Like it was a close fight against Derek Krantz, and he pushed hard in the 3rd round to get on the win. This is like I mentioned, this is a tough fight to pick. Song is younger, but he's taking a step up in competition. And I seem to always get Max Griffin fights wrong. I'm going to go with Max Griffin this time. I think you just got to outwork him in a really close, maybe a highly debated fight. And I say Griffin wins a split decision.
I'm with you in this one being a tough one to pick. Song is, he's 4-1 in the UFC, but part of that is the result of very Chinese fighter in the UFC matchmaking, where they do try to find ways to justify keeping them on, to justify keeping them on roster. Whereas Griffin is, he's fought tough competition pretty much right from the jump. And the funny thing is, like, Song himself is a very physically strong guy, but it feels as though he gets out muscled by guys that aren't as strong as him. And I'm not sure how even to quantify or explain that. I do think Griffin wins this one. I like your classification of Griffin as someone who gets a lot of takedowns despite not being a great wrestler. Like there needs to be a name for that. because there are several fighters I can think of who kind of match that description, that they get takedowns and they seem to be able to get the fight to the ground when they want or need to in surprising ways a lot of the time without being like just a conventional wrestler. I don't know if this will live up to the amount of action that they're implying by putting it on the main card, despite it having a guy who's sub 500 in the UFC on it. But I do like Griffin to win this one. And honestly, I do think he wins it by kind of bullying Song around in the clinch and probably getting some opportunistic takedowns when he needs them. Give me Max Griffin by decision in a fight that is fun, but definitely not your fight of the night. We move back to the men's bantamweight division for an interesting matchup between Adrian Yanez and Gustavo Lopez. Yanez, the 27-year-old Houstonian, is 12-3 overall. He is 1-0 in the UFC since joining with a sensational performance on Dana White's Contender Series last August. There he knocked out Brady Wong in just 39 seconds. His UFC debut on the Halloween Fight Night card featured a head kick knockout in the first round over Victor Rodriguez. He'll be taking on Lopez. The 31-year-old is 12-5 overall. He is 1-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Merab Dvalishvili, getting soundly out-wrestled at UFC on ESPN I versus Calvillo in June. He came back from that to choke out Anthony Burchak in the first round of their matchup at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Teixeira in November. Yanez is a comfortable favorite here. It's out there minus 220, minus 225. Lopez is available at plus 180 as the underdog. Keith, who you got in this one and why?
This is a good matchup. I don't know if it should be on the main card, but I think that has a lot to do with Yanez's performances on the Contender Series. He's a stalking counter striker. He's very, very comfortable on his feet. He stays very relaxed, not a lot of tension in his arms, good vision, kind of sees everything coming at him, fast hands, nice snap on his punches, good timing, on his opponent's attacks, does slip an attack and leave himself in position to counter with power shots, which I like to see. We've seen his crushing high kick recently. He does need to start checking leg kicks, and that'll be a problem against Lopez. He's not a good wrestler. Miles Johns struggled to keep him down, though he is a excuse me. I said he's not a good wrestler, though Miles Johns did struggle to keep him down, and that's because he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He can, look for submissions and stuff off his back. Move over to Lopez. Lopez is a decent striker. His left hook is his best strike. He's got some good power, does mix in takedowns well, though he was taken down about a dozen times against Merab, which, in fairness, everyone gets taken down a dozen times by Merab. He did do very well to get back up to feet, which is why Merab's takedown, added. A lot of it was mat returns, which we've talked about a million times. He jumps on guillotines, which doesn't help his takedown defense, but he almost caught Merab with it, in fairness. Though he puts himself in trouble by trying to chase it. He did have a pretty slick back take in his last fight against Anthony Burchak. Now, as far as the prediction goes, this is a sneaky bout. Lopez is a solid grappler, though Merab, took him down, but he had Merab in some scary moments. If he could turn this into a wrestling match, like he said in interviews, like, ready for cheap plug, Adrian Yanez mentioned to me in the newest episode of MMA Past, Present, Future, which actually just went up while we were talking. Make sure you check that out. Also with I believe, a really fun conversation I had with Sean Shirk, and fighting this weekend all the way from Wales, Ben Ellis. So there you go. That's my cheap plug. Back to this one. He can win. He can win if he can turn it into a wrestling match. However, I think it's going to remain a lot on the feet due to Yanez's footwork, his length, and some of the scramble ability we've seen. If his does stay in the feet, I'm really high on Yanez's striking. I think he pieces them up, and I actually think he finds a finish. So give me Yanez. I say he takes him out in the second round by knockout.
All right, I will just jump in on the cheap plug of the most recent episode of MMA Past, Present, and Future, because I, as one of the Sherdog editors, I was the one who posted that overnight once it was filed. So I got to watch most of it just as I checked the timestamps. I thought the interview with Sean Shirk was fantastic. For some reason, just because
You,
of
sir.
just because of the persona that he gave off during his career, where he was not an exciting interview during his career, not terribly insightful, like he wouldn't let people in very much. Obviously, he very famously didn't watch MMA even during his career, still doesn't now. You got some very interesting stuff out of him, just how kind of frank he was about how and why he lost the BJ Penn fight. Uh, about which of his fights. I know you asked him, like, was there anyone that you wanted to fight and never got a chance to? And he slightly misunderstood the question, but it became a great answer anyway, because he talked about which of his losses he'd like to get back and why, which was very interesting, I thought. Really good stuff. Obviously, Adrian Yanez, a guy that I know a little bit just from seeing him around town. But yeah, really exciting stuff. Anyway, I like Yanez for all the reasons you mentioned. He's already one of the better strikers at bantamweight in the UFC. Early in his career, he was more of a straight boxer. His kicks have just gotten better and better. He's still not a guy that I trust to sock away rounds if he's not finishing the fight. Like, if he's not able to knock the person out, I don't necessarily trust him to win rounds and to get a decision. He is definitely a finisher type of fighter. You look at his losses, all of his losses are to good guys. They're all guys that have either been in the UFC, are in the UFC, or they're UFC level. It's Miles Johns, Domingo Pilarte, and Levi Mills. But in each of those fights, it's not that he was just completely outclassed. It's just that he has a game that's built to finish, not necessarily to win rounds, and he can be taken advantage of on the ground. Having said that, I don't think Gustavo Lopez is the guy to do it. I think Lopez is going to give Yanez exactly the kind of counter opportunities he wants, and I'm with you. I've got Yanez by second round knockout in this one. Next up, it is the very rare occasion of two debuting fighters debuting against one another this high on a UFC main card. In the women's strawweight division, it is Cheyanne Buys versus Montserrat Ruiz. Buys, the 25-year-old, is 5-1 overall. She is making her debut off of an impressive performance in taking a unanimous decision from Hillary Rose on Dana White's Contender Series last August. Ruiz, who is stepping in on relatively short notice, is 28 years old. The Mexican is 9-1 overall. She fought most recently at Invicta 41 last July, taking a first-round submission over Janeza Morandin, which allowed Ruiz to bounce back from the first loss of her career, which had been at Invicta 33 all the way back in 2018, where she lost a unanimous decision to Danielle Taylor. Buys, one of the stronger favorites on the card. She is minus 355. Ruiz plus 295, even up there at plus 300, it looks like. Keith, well, I was going to just ask, should she be a 3.5 to 1 favorite? Speaking, of course, of Cheyanne Buys. And do you think she's going to make good on that against the short notice opponent in Ruiz?
Well, so there's a lot to unwrap there. So the first question is, should she be such a favorite? No, she absolutely should not be such a favorite. I already picked her husband to win. I like Buys. I liked her on the Contender Series. I mentioned, she got one of the highest praise of mine. She did take on a New Englander and Hillary Rose, who is not UFC level fighter, and she kind of styled on her. Buys got good head movement with both her. It's good movement in general with both her feet and her head. Like, she moves her head good, but she also circles well, cuts angles well. She has fast hands. Her straight right hand is the best punch. Got a good check left hook. Good power. She's dropped many opponents. She comes from a Taekwondo background. You see a little bit of that in the way she throws kicks. She'll even do like a traditional push kick or like that side push kick, similar to what Holly Holm likes to do. Just good kicks everywhere. She will mix in wrestling, though she will set up her shots from too far away. She'll shoot too far away. But if she gets to like the body lock, she can get some body locks in there. She is a female, so of course she throws in the headlock throw, which I hate. She's hard to submit. Vanessa Demopoulos put her in a million submission tags. She kept finding a way out, and she can get some submissions off her back. The other thing that stands out to me when I watch a regional film study of her, of how insanely tough she is. She dislocated her arm in one of the fights, and continued to try to keep fighting on with a dislocated arm, which was she was trying to pull on her arm and get it back in while she was fighting. Move over to Ruiz. Ruiz only has one loss in her career, and it's to Danielle Taylor, which is not a bad loss. Her last fight, she just ran through and submitted Janessa Morandin, who is not a bad fighter, someone who I thought would be in the UFC someday, though she's kind of went a 180 than what I originally thought she would be. She's a southpaw. Ruiz, talking about Ruiz again, southpaw, fast hands, high output. She kind of fights in blitzes. She'll like kind of stay on the outside and then suddenly just dive into the pocket and load a big combination. Though she does just wing her punches. It's not the most technically sound strikes. She lacks head movement. She's going to get hit a lot because of her aggressive style. If she can close the distance, she likes upper body clinches. She throws a headlock throw in herself. Good ground and pound. She's got 2 submission wins off her record, but the most impressive is the way she submitted Miranda in her last fight. Got a key lock from the scarf choke. The kind of like you got the headlock and you reach your leg over and kind of extend it to almost like an arm bar. I think Bays, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. Bays is the better athlete. I think she can outwork her from distance while fighting off some takedown attempts. However, if Ruiz gets her down and submits her, I would not be shocked at all. I would say if I'm a betting man, like I'm betting the underdog, I'm not betting it at all. Like they call it the dog or pass. Give me Bays by decision. So I say Bays. I'm sorry, I know I'm saying the name wrong. Bays by decision. So we get back-to-back wins or 2-0 for the family. But I don't think either fight, they're both favorites. I don't think either fight's an easy fight. Like, I would not be shocked if they go 0-2.
I'm with you. Like, I'm surprised that Bays is, well, I take that back. I'm not surprised that Bays is this big of a favorite, but I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it. However, Danielle Taylor beat Ruiz, I think, by doing basically what Bays is going to want to do. Just kind of sprawl and brawl, turn aside the takedown attempts, and just keep chipping at her from range with kicks and punches. The question is whether I think she can pull that off. I do think she can. I think this might be a fight like the Taylor fight, where Ruiz is trying to get it to the ground, and just she's able to eventually, but by then it is too late. Bays has already socked away the first 2 rounds, because Bays is going to be bigger than Ruiz. She's a good athlete anyway. Like she's strong, she's quick, she's fluid, but Ruiz just feels undersized for strawweight. She's kind of stuck because she feels undersized when she fights strawweights, but she doesn't look like she can necessarily make atom weight. That's just a bad look. But yeah, I don't know if she should be a minus 350 favorite, but I definitely favor Bays to win. Give me Bays by unanimous decision. With that, we come to the co-main event of UFC Vegas 22, a lightweight matchup between 2 pretty standout prospects well, I'll get to that in a moment, but between Gregor Gillespie and Brad Riddell. Gillespie, who, as we mentioned off the top, I believe turns 34 today, is 13-1 in his mixed martial arts career. He is 6-1 in the UFC, having debuted in the promotion with 6 straight wins, the last 5 of them by finish, before picking up his first defeat in a crushing head kick knockout loss to Kevin Lee back at UFC 244 all the way back in November of 2019. He faces Riddell, the 29-year-old New Zealander, is 9-1 overall. He is a perfect 3-0 in the UFC. He fought twice last year. He beat Alex De Silva by unanimous decision at UFC 253. Before that, he beat Magomed Mustafayev by split decision at UFC Fight Night Felder versus Hooker in February. Odds definitely favor the American. He is minus 245. Riddell is plus 205 as the underdog. It's an interesting case for Gillespie, Keith, because Gillespie is someone, he came into the UFC as a highly touted prospect. You know, he was a former NCAA Division I wrestling champ at, I believe, 149 pounds. He came to the UFC 7-0, won his first 6 fights in a row, last 5 by finish, a lot of them like very violent finishes. And he was the rare fighter who kind of crept into the bottom of the Sherdog lightweight rankings, despite not having any top 15 wins to his credit. And to pull the curtain back a little bit, on the entire rankings panel, you were the person who was most against having him ranked. And that's not because you dislike Gillespie. There's like, there are other fighters you thought had shown more. And at least in the Lee fight, you showed, okay, here was his first shot at a top 10 fighter, and it went badly not his way, and showed that, you know, there are some holes he needs to shore up. It's interesting. I even made the mistake. I called it a prospect fight, even though Gillespie turns 34 today. He is a guy with the upside, the promise of a prospect, but he has the time frame of a veteran in which to really get anything done with it. You know, not everybody can be Leonardo Santos and still be hanging around winning fights when they're 41. Before I'm going to ask you for your prediction on the fight, but where do you sit as far as Gillespie's ceiling? Obviously, some of it will depend on whether he wins this weekend, but, you know, do you see top 10 potential in him? It's hard to say you see title run in anybody at lightweight just because it's such a crowded division, but, you know, tell me what you see when you see Gillespie, and tell me if you think the odds makers are sleeping on Riddell a little bit here.
So 2 questions. I'll answer those before I break down the fighters. So Gillespie, yeah, do I see a top 10 guy? Yeah. So when I was arguing for him to be out of the rankings, it wasn't in the sense of a talent. That I don't think he was talented enough. It was just simply that I didn't think his, we rank based on criteria, like the people you beat, who, based on basically who have you beaten deserve this. And I don't think his best win was probably Yancy Medeiros or something like that. I don't think that was top 10, especially in that division. So he definitely has it. His age is definitely concerning, though. I mean, when you have such a good division, I would have liked him to be like 28, 29, not 34. Is the odds maker betting, going against Riddell and overlooking him? Absolutely. To me, this is one of the hardest fights to pick on the entire card. Riddell's good, like really good. So far as their styles, Gillespie's undersized. That's the first thing we talk about with him. We've talked about he probably should be a featherweight. He's not that big of a guy. He does land punches on the feet, though I'm not. I think his boxing needs some improvement, though it's not that bad. But he lands a lot of punches because his opponents drop their hand because they're so worried about his wrestling. His jab is busy. It's effective. He has shown some KO power. I was there in attendance when he knocked out Andrew Holbrook cold. He telegraphs his power punches a little bit. So that's obviously worrisome. He doesn't move his head. He kind of stands up a little too tall. His chin is high. I'm not really worried about his chin after that brutal knockout from Kevin Lee in his last fight. I'm more about the psyche of him. Is he going to be gun shy? Is he going to be scared to step in the pocket and unload? Well, if that limits him strictly to a wrestler, that's never a good thing. But if you are going to be limited to a wrestler, beat Gregor Gillespie. This guy's a Division I NCAA champion. That is no small task. The NCAA's wrestling championship is going on right now as we're talking this weekend. There'll be a whole lot of extremely high-level wrestlers who are competing in that tournament. But only, 10? I think 10 weight classes now that will win. There will be 10 champions. There'll be a whole bunch of guys go home heartbroken who will never win the NCAAs. That's not the case with Gregor Gillespie. He has smothering top control. DC going back to the Yancy Medeiros fight, DC was going crazy about how good his top control is back when he was wrestling and also in MMA. And he has a classic wrestler type submissions. Like he'll look for a head and arm triangle. Now move over to Riddell. Riddell's well rounded. He's a great athlete. He's a good striker. He fights behind a high guard. He has a lot of variety in strikes. He's got a lot of weapons that he can hurt you with. Good jab, clean right hand. He throws combinations. Good tight pocket boxing. I said this last time when he fought Alex de Silva. I'm most impressed with his counter striking. Not necessarily his punches, but his mentality in his counter striking. He'll just plant his feet and be like, I'm not going to back up. I'm going to stand here. I'm going to time your coming in, and you're not going to back me up. And I'm really impressed with that. Step in elbows is something he'll look for if you get in close to him. Calf kicks. He's a good grappler. He can get a takedown himself. He will shoot a little too far without setting up. I don't think he'll take down Gregor Gillespie. But he's good in scrambles. We saw that against Mustayev. That's a perfect example. Though he did get taken down by Alex de Silva in their fight in the first round, I think it was a little bit more of just a perfectly timed takedown where Riddell wasn't expecting it. That won't be the case against Greg Gillespie. That's going to obviously be in the back of his mind. He also, got up, he worked his way to his feet, and he had good cardio. Like, that was a close fight going in the third round, and he pressed hard. I love this fight from a talent sense. It's going to answer a lot of questions about both guys. The winner of this one, I'll be probably jumping on the bandwagon. I'm not going to be arguing for Gillespie to be in our rankings after this one. But that said, I don't really want to see anybody lose. And I really think this wasn't the matchup that they should have gave Gillespie after his first loss. Like, I think he should have got a little bit more of a softball. I really, really wanted to take Riddell. I thought I was going to, too. And like I said, if he wins, I'm jumping on Riddell's bandwagon hard. But there might not be much room for me. Unfortunately, while he's so good, his takedown defense isn't perfect. And I know this is like such a crazy thing to say, but like one takedown from Alex de Silva made me go with Gregor Gillespie. Like, I was taking Riddell until I saw that takedown. I just expect Gillespie to get 2 takedowns. And if he gets 2 takedowns, that could be the difference. I think we're going to have some really fun scrambles. I think this fight's going to be so close. I think there'll be a lot of debates again. This is my fight of the night. Give me Gregor Gillespie by split decision.
Excellent. My pick here is it's dependent on Gillespie looking at least as good as he did up to and including the Lee fight. There's no saying what's going to happen, with a guy that's been off for like 15, 16 months, due, in part to injury, is 34 years old. You never know what you're going to get. But assuming that he is still the Gregor Gillespie that, ripped through his first 6 fights in the UFC, I do have him in this fight. It's interesting. I analyzed and overanalyzed and overthought that Alex de Silva takedown on Riddell in the first round of their fight as well in thinking about this. It's a whole different dynamic, of course. Riddell, like you said, is going to be much more aware of the takedown, much more, be expecting it much more. But I'm with you. I think Gillespie will be able to get him down, and I don't even know how confident I am that Riddell's going to not just be able to get back up, but even survive down there in the second or third round. You look at Gillespie, he's got a lot of arm triangle choke submissions on his record. The arm triangle choke is, of course, it's a very heavyweight submission. It's also a very wrestlery submission. It's one that feels very natural to an elite wrestler. I think Gillespie is going to submit him. I think give me Gregor Gillespie in a very, very good fight by third round arm triangle choke, and we'll be back to arguing over whether he belongs in the top 15 or not. Just I saw what Kevin Lee did to him, but unless, like you say, it's broken his psyche and just makes him completely gun shy, that's not something that Brad Riddell is going to duplicate on him. It's time for our main event. Up to 5 rounds of middleweight action between the veteran longtime contender Derek Brunson and the red-hot Kevin Holland. Brunson, the 37-year-old North Carolinian, is 21-7 overall. He is 12-5 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight winning streak, having beaten Elias Theodorou by decision back in May of 2019, Ian Heinisch by decision at UFC 241 in August of 2019. And in his lone fight of 2020, he knocked out and exhausted Edmund Shabazian early in the 3rd round of their matchup in the headlining fight of UFC Fight Night 173 in August. Standing across the octagon from him will be Sherdog's 2020 Breakthrough Fighter of the Year, Kevin Holland. The 28-year-old Texan is 21-5 overall. He is 8-2 in the UFC. He is on a 5-fight win streak, all 5 of which took place in the last about 7.5 months of 2020. The victims on that stretch: Anthony Hernandez, whom he knocked out in just 39 seconds at UFC on ESPN 8 in May; Joaquin Buckley, whom he knocked out in the 3rd round of their matchup at UFC Fight Night Lewis versus Olenek in August; Darren Stewart, whom he defeated by split decision at UFC Fight Night 178 in September. On a quick turnaround and against a short notice opponent in Charlie Ontiveros, he injured him into submitting with a slam in the 1st round. And then to top it off, in December, knocked out Ronaldo Jacare Souza with punches from the seat of his pants at UFC 256. Perhaps reflecting just how impressive that streak has been, Holland is the favorite in this fight, and the odds this week are creeping ever further in his favor. Right now, as of Thursday evening, he is minus 175, where you can get Brunson at plus 158, it looks like, is the best available odds on him. Keith, who do you have in this one? And assuming there's no weird controversy, there's not a disqualification for the 3rd week in a row, how close is the winner of this fight to a middleweight title shot?
I mean, a lot of this has to do with what Adesanya wants to do. They're a lot closer now with Jan Blachowicz winning. But, I mean, Adesanya is talking about Darren Till and maybe Vettori. I could see Holland, if he gets a win, being close because he hasn't faced Adesanya. He did call him out. There's some kind of weird backstory about them having issues backstage. So that one does, but Brunson, I still would be 1 or 2 more wins away because we saw Brunson get absolutely smashed by Adesanya. Now, I'm assuming you want me to start breaking this fight down?
Absolutely, please.
All right. It's weird. Like this is the main event, and I don't care that much about this matchup. And I think it's just simply like I feel like Derek Brunson is what he is at this point. He's a southpaw. I will say this: in his last fight, and this stand out more than anything, I was very surprised how composed he was against Edmund Shabazian, because that is the 180 narrative opposite of Derek Brunson. He's usually a wild man. That wasn't the case against Shabazian. He is an unorthodox, bit of like kind of backwards style fighter. He's flat-footed. He drops his hands, wings wild punches, throws from his hips, can often overthrow. I mean, look at the Robert Whittaker fight. He was like almost knocking himself over, throwing punches. He'll throw same-side attacks, which I kind of like because it's so unorthodox. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, he'll throw a left kick followed by a left hand, like in a combination. Like on the same, like the 2 punches on the same side is just a weird thing to see, but he does it a lot. I mentioned left side. That's because Derek Brunson's left hand happy. He wings his overhand left, always constantly looking for that knockout. He can be backed up with pressure, and he definitely doesn't like fighting off of pressure. Edmund Shabazian did have some early success kicking Brunson's body. Brunson has added a lot more kicks to his game. He's a good grinding in close quarters fighter. Dirty boxing is something he's good at. He's good at just pushing you against fence, using his he's a physically strong guy. You see him he's a big, muscular middleweight. He'll grind you against the fence. Get some, I would say, good, not great wrestling, even though he comes from a wrestling background. But he'll reach it kind of like almost like Michael Chiesa style, where he doesn't really shoot. He'll just reach on a single leg and get it. And he's also good at striking when you want to wrestle, and then when you start thinking about his striking, he'll come in for an entry on his wrestling. On top, he's not really much of his submissions ready. He looks for ground and pound. Now move over to Kevin Holland. He's a long and lengthy guy, pretty elusive. He's got some good movement. He does also throw from his hips a little bit, but it's more of a Trevin Giles style, where it's coming from different angles than it is unorthodox, like little up jabs and stuff like that. He's very relaxed for a young fighter. I've noticed that he doesn't really panic. He's developing some power, a nice snap. I mean, he's got good accuracy. He does well on the outside or all the way in. The mid-range is not a strength, but that's not a strength for Brunson either. So that's not a bad thing. He kind of lulls a little bit and then explodes with stuff similar to what we were talking about Ruiz on the card, where he'll lull and then kind of explode to the pocket and land shots. Looks for push kicks from range. He does well to not get caught clean, something similar to what Anderson Silva does. Rolls a lot of shoulder rolls, something you see a lot of boxers do, not necessarily MMA fighters. It's good when he's rolling. It's not good when he's pulling back. He has been caught pulling his head straight back. I mentioned this last time we talked about him, and we break down Kevin Holland a lot because he fights all the time. He covers distance so quick because of his length that he can be on the outside and then suddenly on the inside with one step. He's a clinch fighter, but he clinch fights weird. Like I shouldn't say weird, but it's effective, but it's just different. He's not going to pull your head down and uppercut you. He'll more let you get double underhooks, and then he'll two-hand palm slap your ears, which is extremely painful. Knees in the clinch, he'll look for the short knees when he frames. Will go for a takedown, though he is similar to Max Griffin, by no means is he a powerful wrestler. Though I've seen some improvement. He got taken down by Brandon Allen and kind of rolled, but in other fights he showed some improvement in his defensive wrestling, and he is a submission threat. As far as the fight goes, this is very close. It could go either way. I think Brunson will have more success early, and if he doesn't mentally break Holland like he did Shabazian, then Holland can have some success late. I think Brunson can grind him in the clinch. That might be his best position. I think it's going to be close, but at this point in their careers, I've kind of over Brunson. I would not be surprised if he wins at all, but I'm a little more excited in Holland, and he just seems like he's on his way up the mountain, while Brunson is on his way down slowly. He's getting pulled down. He's kind of fighting himself a little bit. He's not going willingly, but he's definitely going down. So give me a Holland in a close decision, not the fight that gets to him. Everyone gets super excited to see him next, though. Like, this might be the one that it'll be the biggest name on his resume, but it won't be the performance that really gets him over like Vettori did against Jack Hermanson. Like, I don't expect that, but give me Holland.
Yeah, I like what you said about Holland, that he has a certain calm and composure. He doesn't panic. There is no greater definition of doesn't panic than Jacare is kneeling over you in your guard, and you laugh and say, I had a dream about this, and then knock him out 5 seconds later. I mean, yeah, he has just this ridiculous amount of confidence in himself. I say ridiculous. I don't mean it's literally ridiculous, because it is a confidence born of demonstrated ability. He was on a 4-fight winning streak that he just extended to 5. I do think Holland is going to make Brunson uncomfortable on the feet for as long as they're striking at distance. I just have the feeling that Brunson, for a guy who is as much of a veteran as he is and has much success as he's had striking against some very good strikers, it's possible for him to just look super out of sorts on the feet. And I don't know quite how to describe it other than the Elias Theodorou fight, which was just an absolutely miserable fight. And you know that's what you're going to get with Theodorou, but just it completely stymied Brunson from getting off any offense of his own. And Holland, I think, will be able to do that kind of thing to Brunson, only with a little more punishment, a little more zing on it. I do agree that Brunson's best chance for offensive success on the feet will be in the clinch. Just the question will be, can he force the clinch? Can he force the clinch in the places and situations he wants? I suspect he might be able to. I just don't know if that's going to be enough to win him rounds, let alone, finish Holland or put him in serious trouble. I also do agree with you that this probably won't be a sensational performance by Holland that has us all buzzing. But I do expect Holland to win a decision in this fight, and probably for both guys to go back to the drawing board afterwards and be frustrated with their performances. Brunson, because, man, I didn't pull the trigger at all until like the 4th round when I started like desperately going for takedowns, and Holland just because like I should have styled on this guy and instead it just turned into kind of a grindy fight. But yeah, I give me Holland to survive and advance, by decision. And I'm with you in that the title implications are greater for Holland here, just because Brunson will have to prove so much to really get to the front of the line there, as long as Adesanya is still in the division. And that's it. All 12 fights from UFC on ESPN 21, Brunson versus Holland, broken down by Keith and by yours truly. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Be sure to come to the Sherdog front page or the Sherdog YouTube page to join Keith and me for the live recap immediately after the main event. We will be taking your questions and comments. If we got a bunch of these fights wrong, we will happily take your abuse. Happy birthday, Gregor Gillespie, and thank all of you for listening.